When the anniversary video revealed their secret texts on the ballroom screen, everyone watching realized that my husband and our neighbor had been betraying me for years while sitting across from me at family dinners. For 3 long years, they had carried on their affair in our home, in hotels, and even at family events, completely confident that I was too naive to notice their deception. Before I show you the moment when everything changed, subscribe to Nexus of Revenge for daily stories that prove patience is the ultimate weapon in serving cold revenge. Let me show you how I spent 3 calculated years carefully setting up the perfect plan that would leave them exposed in front of everyone who mattered. I met Theo Winters at 29 while photographing one of his development projects. A controversial renovation of a historic factory being converted into luxury apartments. I was hired to document the transformation, to capture the beauty in what many locals considered destruction. That's where he first noticed me, or rather my work. "You caught the ghost's staircase," he said, pointing to a photograph where I'd captured the shadow of a removed stairwell still visible on the wall. "No one else even noticed it was there." I smiled, surprised that this confident developer in his tailored suit had spotted such a subtle detail. "I like finding what others miss." "You see things differently," he said, his grey eyes holding mine a moment too long. "That's rare." Our courtship was a whirlwind of architectural tours, candlelit dinners in historic hotels, and conversations that lasted until dawn. He valued my artistic perspective, often changing design elements based on my observations. When he proposed 6 months later at a rooftop garden overlooking the city skyline, I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding at the Winters family estate made the local society pages. I still remember Vivian Winters, my new mother-in-law, appraising my off-the-rack wedding dress with a tight smile before pulling me aside during the reception. "The Winters name opens doors," she said, champagne flute in her perfectly manicured hand, "but it also comes with expectations. Appearances matter more than you realize." She touched my arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Warren had his distractions over the years. I chose not to see them. Sometimes that's the wisest course. I nodded politely, too happy to recognize the warning in her words. For 5 years, we were happy, or I thought we were. I scaled back my career to support Theo's growing development company, documenting his projects while quietly missing the independence of my earlier work. We travelled to architectural wonders around the world, made plans for children, and built what I believed was an unshakable foundation. The miscarriage in our 3rd year changed things. I was nearly 4 months along when it happened. Long enough to have picked out nursery colours, but not long enough for the world to know what we'd lost. While I sought connection in our shared grief, Theo retreated into work. "I'm securing our future," he'd say, kissing my forehead before disappearing for another late night at the office. "We'll try again when the timing is better." Then Natalie Klein moved into the house next door, a sleek, modern build that stood in contrast to our meticulously restored Victorian. Recently divorced from a Silicon Valley executive, she was reinventing herself as a luxury real estate agent in our affluent community. I actually liked her at first. She brought over homemade bread the day she moved in, told funny stories about disastrous open houses, and spoke with genuine emotion about her sister Kimberly's battle with multiple sclerosis. I even recommended her real estate services to friends, pleased when she began to find success. The three of us often had drinks on our patio. As the sun set over our exclusive neighborhood, Natalie would kick off her designer heels, accept a glass of wine, and share industry gossip that made Theo laugh in a way I hadn't heard in months. Looking back, I should have noticed how Theo's eyes lingered on her just a second too long, or how their conversations continued in hushed tones when they thought I'd gone inside. I should have questioned why neighborhood association meetings suddenly required both their attendance so frequently, but grief had blunted my famously sharp eye for detail, and perhaps a small part of me didn't want to see what was slowly taking shape right before me. I discovered the truth on our 5th anniversary. I'd decided to create a photo album chronicling our years together, a return to my artistic roots, and a way to remind us both of the foundation we'd built. Spreading dozens of recent photographs across my studio table, my trained eye noticed a pattern I'd been blind to in real time. There it was, in image after image from neighborhood gatherings, holiday parties, and charity events. The subtle glances between Theo and Natalie, their bodies angled towards each other despite conversing with others, identical expressions of forced neutrality when caught in the same frame. The photographer in me recognized what the wife in me didn't want to see. My hands trembled as I gathered the photos, arranging them in chronological order. The evidence was unmistakable. Their connection had grown more intimate over the past year, with a visible comfort level that couldn't be explained by mere neighborhood friendship. Confirmation came a week later through an email mistake. Theo had given the hotel my email as a backup contact, never expecting they'd use it. "Thank you for your recent stay, Mr. Winters," the message read, with photos of the suite, as requested, attached below. My stomach dropped as I opened them. Images of an elegant boutique hotel room just 30 miles away, taken the weekend Theo claimed to be at a development conference in Chicago. There, on the nightstand, sat Theo's distinctive vintage watch, a gift from his grandfather. Draped over a chair was a patterned silk scarf I'd seen around Natalie's neck a dozen times. The room seemed to tilt around me as I scrolled through the images, my breath coming in short gasps. The familiar was suddenly foreign, my entire life revealed as an elaborate set design rather than a true home. That night, while Theo was at yet another business dinner, I sat on our bedroom floor breathing into a paper bag, surrounded by printed emails I'd discovered on his laptop. Their messages weren't just about physical attraction. They mocked my unawareness, shared intimate details of my miscarriage grief, and discussed their future together once Theo found the right time to end our marriage. "I can't believe she didn't notice when you left our anniversary dinner to take my call," Natalie had written. "Sometimes I think she's just willfully blind." "She sees what she wants to see," Theo had replied. "It's easier that way for everyone." What broke me wasn't just the affair. It was discovering that Theo had created a shell company to divert our joint investment funds, money I'd contributed from my photography savings, to purchase property intended as their future home. The architectural plans on his hard drive showed a master suite designed around Natalie's preferences that we had once discussed for our own dream home. "She'll get the minimum from the prenup," one email read. "My parents will make sure of it. They've handled these situations before." The final blow came later that week when I returned early from a doctor's appointment and overheard my best friend Paige on the phone in my kitchen. "You can't keep this going forever," she said, unaware I stood frozen in the hallway. "Audrey might seem oblivious, but she's more observant than you think. If she finds out I've known all this time..." My only ally had been aware of their betrayal for months and said nothing. I slipped back out the front door before she could discover me, drove to a park 3 miles away, and screamed into my jacket until my throat burned. I stood in our kitchen that night, staring at the knife block, overwhelmed by options I never thought I'd consider. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to scream and throw things and burn it all down, to pack a bag and disappear without explanation, to call Theo's parents and investors and everyone we knew. But another cooler part of me, the part that could calculate exposures and frame perspectives, began considering a different approach. The photographer in me knew that timing and patience created the most powerful images. Why rush a confrontation that would only leave me with the minimum settlement from our prenuptial agreement? I placed the knife back in the block and began to think more carefully about the composition I wanted to create. Everything crystallized 3 days later at my in-laws' 40th anniversary celebration. The ballroom of the country club glittered with wealth and influence, Theo's parents at the centre of it all, accepting congratulations for their enduring union with practiced smiles. Theo kept his hand possessively at my lower back as we circulated, his charm on full display. My beautiful wife, he'd say, introducing me to business associates as though I were another successful acquisition. All the while, his phone buzzed in his pocket with messages I now knew came from Natalie. Across the room, I caught Vivian watching me with knowing eyes. She cornered me by the champagne fountain during a moment alone, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she touched my arm, the same gesture from our wedding day. "You seem tense, dear," she said, her voice low and practiced. "Is everything all right?" "Just a headache," I lied, wondering if my face betrayed any of what I'd discovered. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. "The key to a lasting marriage is selective attention, dear. See what serves you and blur the rest." She sipped her champagne, eyes moving to where Theo stood laughing with his father. Warren had his indiscretions over the years. All successful men do. The wife who endures emerges stronger. When she mentioned casually that my prenuptial agreement would change favourably at 10 years instead of 5, I understood exactly what she was suggesting. Endure the humiliation for financial security. Like she had done. Like all the Winter's wives before her. Driving home that night, with Theo drunkenly reminiscing about his parents' marriage, something inside me hardened into resolve. I watched his profile in the passing streetlights, this man I had loved who now seemed like a stranger, and made my decision. I wouldn't confront, I wouldn't leave, I would wait, and I would plan. The next morning, while Theo nursed his hangover, I called the attorney whose card Marcus, Theo's brother, had slipped me months ago with a whispered, "Just in case you ever need options." I didn't want a divorce, yet. I wanted protection. I opened a private bank account, secured a safe deposit box, and began studying our prenuptial agreement like it was architectural code. My moral compass wavered during a mentoring session with a young photography student from Theo's youth program. 16-year-old Zoe had remarkable talent despite her difficult background. One of the kids from Theo's mentorship initiative that represented his one genuinely good quality. "Can photography tell the truth without words?" she asked as we reviewed her portfolio, her eyes earnest behind thick glasses. "That's exactly what it does," I replied, thinking of the evidence I'd been gathering. "It captures moments people don't think anyone notices." "But is it always right to show what you see?" she persisted. "My foster mom says some truths hurt more than they help." That night I established my boundaries. I would expose truth rather than create lies, protect innocent parties from collateral damage, and maintain my own integrity throughout the process. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice and reclaiming my narrative. For the next 3 years, I became someone else, someone playing a role while the real me worked methodically behind the scenes. I revitalized my photography career, accepting international commissions that gave me both independence and legitimate reasons for absence. I cultivated relationships with developers competing with Winter's development group, positioning myself as professionally valuable beyond being Theo's wife. I documented everything: photos, conversations, financial records, organizing them with the same precision I used in my professional work. I traced the money trail from our joint accounts to the shell company, identified questionable business practices that skirted legal boundaries, and compiled evidence that would withstand scrutiny. Theo never questioned my renewed interest in our finances, or my suggestion that we plan an elaborate 10th anniversary vow renewal. "It's perfect timing with the riverfront development launching," he said, already calculating the business advantages of such a public celebration of our perfect marriage. I smiled and began planning the event that would change everything. Family betrayal leaves scars that never truly heal. What would you have done in this situation? The choices we make in these moments reveal who we truly are. Like this video if you believe justice was necessary here, and comment your thoughts on where you draw the line. The anniversary plans expanded beyond even Theo's expectations. I suggested hosting at the Winters family estate, with a renewal ceremony by the lake followed by a formal dinner for 100 guests. The perfect setting to celebrate 10 years, I told him, not mentioning it was where I'd first photographed him whispering with Natalie during a family gathering years earlier. I insisted on handling the details personally. The invitations, including a special one for our dear neighbour and friend Natalie, the menu, featuring dishes from restaurants Theo claimed to visit on business, and most importantly, the anniversary video tribute I would produce as a surprise. You always did have an eye for the perfect shot, Theo said, kissing my cheek, completely missing the double meaning in my smile. As the date approached, I moved through each day with dual awareness, the perfect wife planning the perfect celebration while the photographer composed the perfect reveal. I scheduled meetings with caterers, knowing Theo would use my absence to see Natalie. I asked his opinion on floral arrangements while secretly backing up incriminating emails. I smiled through fittings for a custom gown while transferring funds to accounts only I could access. The execution unfolded in 3 phases. First, the ceremony itself, standing before family and friends by the lake where the Winters had hosted gatherings for generations. I held Theo's hands and repeated vows I knew were hollow while photographing his face for posterity. His confident smile, unaware that in 2 hours everything would change, became another piece of evidence in my mental catalogue. "You look stunning," he whispered as we walked back up the lawn towards the mansion. "Everyone's impressed." "Just wait," I replied truthfully. "The best is yet to come." The second phase was the carefully orchestrated seating arrangement at dinner, placing Natalie within perfect view of the presentation screen, surrounded by Theo's most important business associates, with his parents at the next table. Marcus and his new fiancée were seated at a strategic angle, while I positioned Paige where her reactions wouldn't warn Theo prematurely. The plan almost collapsed when Paige pulled me aside during cocktail hour, her champagne barely concealing her anxiety. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, guilt finally overcoming loyalty to Theo. "Once you start, you can't take it back." For a moment, looking at her troubled face, I hesitated. We'd been friends since college, long before Theo. Had she been protecting me in her own misguided way? "How long did you know?" I asked quietly. "About them?" She looked away. "Since it started. But Audrey, it's complicated. Theo and I, before you." The missing piece clicked into place. Their past relationship hadn't been just college dating. It had continued in some form, explaining her divided loyalties. "You have a choice right now," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "You can warn him and cement your betrayal, or you can return to your seat and watch what happens next." As Paige deliberated, I saw Theo's hand casually brush Natalie's lower back as they laughed with another guest, the gesture so proprietary it made my stomach turn. My resolve returned, stronger than before, and the final phase began with dessert when I signalled for the lights to dim. Conversations quieted as I stood, champagne glass in hand. "Before we continue celebrating," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I've prepared a special tribute to our journey together." Theo's pleased smile was the last moment of his old life. The video began innocuously, our wedding, vacations, career highlights, professional quality with emotional music that drew appreciative murmurs. Then came the subtle shifts. Background details in certain shots became highlighted. Theo and Natalie's reflection in a window, their matching business trip locations on family calendar close-ups, time-stamped hotel receipts appearing briefly between anniversary wishes. The whispers started around minute 3. By minute 5, when the video showed split-screen financial documents revealing the diverted funds alongside architectural plans for their future home, the room had fallen silent, except for Natalie's audible gasp. Theo lunged for the control panel, but it was too late. The final sequence showed their full email exchange, discussing how they would announce their relationship after divorcing me, timed perfectly with the prenuptial clause that now entitled me to half of everything Theo owned. The screen went dark, and the lights came up on a room frozen in collective shock. "What is this?" Theo hissed, grabbing my arm as guests began murmuring. I smiled, removing his hand with deliberate care. This is what happens when you underestimate someone who photographs details for a living. You've just embarrassed yourself, he said, voice low and dangerous. No one will believe. Mr. Winters, called a voice from across the room. It was Roger Harmon, his primary investor. I think we need to discuss the riverfront project immediately. Theo's face drained of colour as he realised the professional implications. Not just a marital scandal, but financial impropriety displayed before everyone who mattered in his world. Natalie stood frozen at her table, tears streaming down her face, as Vivian Winters approached me with surprising composure. Well played, she said quietly, her expression unreadable. You saw more clearly than I gave you credit for. I learned from the best, I replied, thinking of her warning years ago. I paid attention to exactly what mattered. The aftermath unfolded like a photograph developing in chemicals, slowly revealing a new reality. Vivian Winters, ever practical, immediately distanced herself from Theo at the event, focusing on damage control with key society figures. We had no idea, she murmured repeatedly to influential guests, though her eyes told a different story when they met mine across the room. By the end of the night, she'd invited me to tea the following week, a clear indication that in her world, power recognized power. Natalie fled the ballroom in tears, only to encounter Marcus in the hallway, who had his fiancée from the Environmental Protection Agency with him. Their announcement that some of Theo's diverted funds had been used to circumvent environmental regulations added potential legal consequences to his personal humiliation. We've been building a case for months, Marcus told me later. I just needed to know you were ready. The business impact was immediate and severe. 3 investors approached me before the night ended, distancing themselves from Theo's current development project while hinting at interest in working with me directly. By morning, his company's reputation was in freefall, with social media amplifying what witnesses had shared from the event. Paige found me on the terrace afterward, her expression a mix of respect and fear. I should have told you, she said, hands twisting her clutch. I've known since college that Theo would always put himself first. You chose the wrong loyalty, I said simply. But we all make mistakes. Her revelation of their past relationship was the only surprise I hadn't anticipated, though it explained so much about our complicated friendship. We parted with the understanding that some betrayals can be forgiven, but none forgotten. The most profound moment came a week later when I visited Natalie's sister Kimberly at her physical therapy session, something I'd been doing secretly for months, photographing her progress for an adaptive sports program. I thought you wouldn't come anymore, Kimberly said as I helped adjust her wheelchair for their exercises. After everything. Your sister's choices aren't yours, I replied, setting up my camera to capture her milestone of standing unassisted for the first time. And your story deserves to be documented. Her quiet, thank you for still coming, broke something loose inside me. Revenge had satisfied justice, but compassion would need to guide healing. Theo called daily for weeks, cycling through anger, bargaining, and eventually a broken confession. I didn't think you saw me, he said in our final conversation. I didn't think anyone really did. That was always your mistake, I replied. I see everything. It's what you once loved about me. I didn't take half his company as the prenuptial agreement allowed. Instead, I negotiated control of the foundation funding his youth mentorship program, the one truly good thing he'd created, and sufficient resources to restart my life and career on my terms. Sometimes justice is about more than punishment. It's about preserving what matters. The Victorian house sold quickly. I moved into a modern loft downtown, its walls now displaying my visible-invisible photography series that had been my artistic outlet during those 3 years of pretending. Critics called it my breakthrough work, never knowing it documented my own emotional journey through betrayal and reclaimed power. There's an uncanny sense of seeing beneath surfaces, one reviewer wrote, as though the photographer has trained her eye to capture truths others miss. Sometimes people ask if the revenge was worth 3 years of my life. I tell them it wasn't about revenge at all. It was about truth, consequences, and reclaiming my story. The patience I learned watching and waiting transformed me from someone things happen to into someone who shapes her own narrative, frame by careful frame. I no longer photograph architecture exclusively. Now I capture transitions, moments when something is becoming something else entirely. There's a particular beauty in that transformation that only reveals itself to those patient enough to wait for the perfect moment of exposure. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to hit like and share with someone who might need a little encouragement that patience and self-respect can lead to reclaiming their power too. Relationships built on deception eventually crumble, but your own story is always worth fighting for. Subscribe to Nexus of Revenge to continue joining us on daily journeys of justice served and transformations that prove you're stronger than the betrayals you've faced. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the next video on screen. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.